Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am so happy to announce I have the beautiful women from the Killer Conversations podcast. I have Monica Gibson, and Francesca Marino. How are you guys doing today?
Very good.
Good. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah.
It's really an honor.
No, it's an honor for me. Before we get started with this, you guys have some super, super cool news to let everybody know. Francesca, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
I'd love to. So this past fall, me and Monica worked on a short film together, and it just got into its first festival. It's going to Oregon, Scream Week Festival, for a horror comedy short. And we're super excited to have people see it. It should be online probably after Halloween.
Yeah, it was so fun to make too. So hopefully you can tell that by watching it, that we had an absolute blast.
Yeah, it was super low budget. I mean, barely any money. So Monica was nice enough to be in it and behind the scenes. And, you know, we had people doing 4 and 5 jobs, but when it pays off, especially, it's all worth it. We made a really awesome film. It kind of got disrupted with COVID, but we were able to finish it. And it was so much fun to make.
Yes, and it was written and directed by none other than Francesca Marino.
Yes, passion project.
Yes.
I've been cheesing all day. Like, I've been so happy all day for you guys. Like, this is so cool. Like, I'm so excited for you. This is something that we've all that are horror fans dream about as a kid. Even into adulthood, we dream about, man, I want to write that script or film that movie or be a part of that movie that breaks the ground and gets accepted into that festival. And you've done that. You ladies have done that. So much love, so much respect. I'm so happy and proud of you guys. Such good news. And
thank you so much.
It's out by now. Yeah, I will have the link to everything down here in the description. Make sure you're listening to their podcast. Make sure you're checking the stuff out. They work very hard on what they do, mastering their craft. So don't do it for me. Don't do it for them. Do it for yourself, because you're not going to regret it. I love listening to these ladies. They're so awesome. But today, ladies, we are here to talk about the first horror movie that you ever watched. Monica, let's start with you. Your first horror movie was?
It was the original It movie. I remember the first time I saw it, I was far too young. I'm the youngest of 4. My oldest brother is 15 years older than me, 16, I can't even remember. So I was exposed to a lot of mature movies from a very young age, but I'm not gonna name names. I was friends with this girl, and I would always watch like very mature things when I would go to her house. Like, her parents were not very present, so they had like any movie on at any time of day. And I remember one day after school, I went over to her house and we watched It. I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. And I remember the one thing that stuck with me so much, because I also had insomnia until I was 13. Like diagnosed insomnia to the point where I literally would just sit up at night. So the thing that stuck with me most about the film was definitely the bathtub scene. I remember I didn't want to tell my mom I had watched it because I knew she would be like, what were you doing watching that? So I tried to keep it on the DL, but when I took a bath that night, I started panicking. I ended up telling her.
Are you talking about the wrist scene?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if you meant that or the shower scene with the clown.
Kind of both, to be honest. They both like very, for a 6 or 7-year-old, that sticks with you. So
for sure.
So that was my first.
So when you watched it, was it the one that was on TV, or did you watch like the video format where you watched the whole thing at once?
We watched the whole thing at once. I think it might have been either a DVD or a VHS tape. But I remember she was like, oh my God, like, you have to see this movie that I watched recently. And of course, like, this was also the same time, like, she had just given me a Spice Girls CD, and I was obsessed with that.
So she was like, look, I'm going to tell you what you want, what you really, really want. You're going to want to watch this movie. That's what you want.
Yeah, and I learned a lot of things from this gal. Like, I discovered The Sims at her house, this movie, The Blair Witch Project, which was a whole nother situation. But yeah, lots of good times over there.
Tell her I said thank you for introducing you to this, because now I have you here. So all
Yeah,
roads
I
lead to Ken
will.
in this situation. So tell her I said thank you.
I will, yes.
And Francesca, what about you? What was the first horror movie that you ever watched?
First one was The Exorcist, just plain old 1973 VHS. Really, I took the plunge. I figured, why not? If we're gonna go for life and
Yeah,
horror, let's just
you
start.
dove into the deep end.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So let me ask you this, because with me, honestly, The Exorcist has a really big stigma around it, and I've talked about this on the podcast before. The Exorcist is the only film. We owned a video store when I was a little boy, Downtown Video. So I watched. That's how I got into horror movies, was just watching movies over and over. The Exorcist is the only film in my life that my mother covered my eyes and then cut off. So at
Wow.
that point, I was like, oh, okay, I got to watch this movie. This is something I have to do. So then I ended up sneaking it from the store and watching it and being like, ooh, I didn't have to watch that. I don't want that. That's bad. So that movie to me is very special because of the stigma it has around it. Now, I could say the same thing because it has a scene in the TV miniseries, the scariest scene I've ever seen in any movie in my life, when Bill is in Georgie's room and he's looking through the photo album and the picture of Georgie winks at him. That scared me so bad as a kid. Like, I wouldn't look at family pictures. I didn't look at photo albums. That scared me so bad. It's like that. And Stephen King has a way of doing that in the movie. Sometimes they come back. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
I do.
They're watching a home video. And in the home video, Chris Demetral, the older brother Wayne, he's all laughing and having fun playing baseball. Then he looks at the camera and he's just like, run, Jimmy, run. And it flashes you right there. And I'm like, oh, no, don't do that to me.
Yeah, the blending of universes or realities in Stephen King movies is something that is especially terrifying because it's the added bonus of you don't know what's real, what's not, how to escape it. It's always one step ahead of you. It's that extra layer of fear that every kid, I mean, it's just, if you couldn't sleep before that, it's the perfect movie to give you insomnia.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, too. So I'm going to bounce a couple questions off you guys. I'm going to try not to repeat myself. Let's start with you, Monica. When we're talking about it, we talked about the scene in the bathtub, how that affected you. But let's talk about death. And I hate saying favorite because that's super dark. So which death in this movie affected you the most?
That's a good question. I feel like it's a very basic answer, but I feel like Georgie more than anything, because I have 3 older brothers, and I think the concept of losing one of my brothers when I was really young was just, especially Georgie reminds me a lot of my brother Tim, who's a musician. He is the closest in age to me, so we're very close, and we were very close growing up. So I think the idea of like losing my brother like to a clown seemed just so horrifying.
Yeah.
And I think that probably impacted me the most. I know that's the most basic answer you can give, but thinking about like where my head was at the first time I watched it, and even when I saw the remake and I've rewatched the original, that's probably consistently the one that just makes me the most sad.
And you got to remember it like this too, for people that think about it. When we're 6, 7, 8, we're watching Five Goes West and The Land Before Time, and you go from that to watching a little boy get his arm ripped off by a clown. That's a huge difference. Like, see, a lot of people now are desensitized to that, but when we were kids, I'm probably showing my age. I think I'm a little older than you ladies. Don't tell me your age because my mom will rise from the grave and kick my ass. But I really think that, for our age, that wasn't something that was a normalcy. Seeing something like that. So to watch, and even though in the original TV miniseries, they didn't have the budget to really show you what happened, you knew once he grabbed that arm in the slow-mo, you knew what was happening. And for us at that age, we're around that age. I was, when the original TV miniseries came out, I was around the boys' age. So these are peers to me getting their arm ate off by a clown. At this point, I'm like, fuck McDonald's. I see what clowns do. So I'm with you. To me personally, now that I'm older, I think Eddie Spaghetti's death kind of tears me apart.
Yeah.
He finally has the bravery. This is battery acid, you slime. And then he just crushes it. You're like, no, Eddie, I love you.
And it's so horrifying too, what Pennywise turns into right before he kills him. It's not, I mean,
Mhm.
obviously he's scary enough looking as is, like when he's not kind of in kill mode, but like
Yeah.
whenever
The
they
jagged teeth.
yeah, the jagged teeth, and especially in the remake, I think it was really frightening too. Like the kind of the head-on, like lower angle they had going to make him look
Mhm.
even that much more kind of large compared to the kids really freaked me out.
And especially Bill Skarsgård, because there was no CGI. Like the stuff he did with
I
his eyes,
know.
that was
Yeah.
all natural stuff. Like that is amazing. And I've talked about this before, but I got a question about the remake compared to the original, so I don't want to get quite into that yet. So
Yeah.
we'll come back to that. Francesca, let me talk to you for a second. When we're talking about The Exorcist, you can't really talk about kill or death scenes because you don't have really that in there. So
Right.
which scene? Let's go with this. Which possessed version kind of got to you the most? Which one affected you the most?
I think it's when Reagan is possessed and tells Karis that his mother is in there with them. Um, Affected me in ways that I can't even explain. Just the dynamic of, because I always loved the whole subplot of having a loved one, a main character going through something hard with a loved one and having their own guilt and their own sort of subplot line of an emotional standpoint.
Sure.
But to then tie it into something so horrible, that's when I knew, like, this movie is not going to spare me anything. That no scares are going to be spared. I mean, I just felt like it was something that we knew he was toying with, was guilt with his mother. And then they just threw it out in front of the whole audience of the devil knows that, which is scary in and of itself, that he knows of what you're feeling, apparently. And then just how emotionally manipulating it is to tell someone that. So that's sort of when I knew I was in for a really rough ride. And it's what sticks out to me the most.
Mm-hmm. See, and for me, it's the crucifix. Like my mom, that's when she covered my eyes.
Yeah.
And so that to me was always like, oh, what's going on here? What's happening? She's stabbing herself. And my mom was like,
Yeah.
no, she's not. Shut
Yeah.
up. Go away. So and one thing I've talked about with The Exorcist, there's only in my recollection been two movies like The Exorcist that really affected people that bad. With The Exorcist, I mean, people were leaving the theater crying,
Yeah.
puking, questioning God. I mean, like it made that much of it got banned.
Yeah.
You know, it was terrible to people. And then to me, the only thing that had that type of reaction was the Blair Witch Project, because the Blair Witch had the perfect marketing scheme, because this was at a point where you couldn't just Google something on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember having legit fights in my front yard with a girl, Sarah Tuckerman. Sarah, if you're watching this, I love you and I miss you. We had a legit fight in my front yard about whether that movie was real or fake.
Yeah.
You know, so that marketing like that is something that just, you can't plan how great the marketing of The Exorcist or the Blair Witch was. And I think that's why these movies are so special to us diehard horror fans.
Yeah.
Because we know how badly they flipped the genre on its head. I mean, you can honestly, there's at least 5, and I'm being generous by saying 5 movies a year that completely borrow, steal, or completely rip off The Exorcist.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying they're bad. I would never bash anybody's art. If you're making art, congratulations, that there's somebody that likes it, and I'm so happy for you. That just may not be for me. But there's all these movies now that we would not have known about had it not been for The Exorcist. So anytime I get to talk about The Exorcist, I ramble on like I am right now.
Yeah.
So
or is it possible not to? I mean, I sort of believe, under the guise of like everything is a mimic or a recreation of something else, originality, I get is super hard. So I always go into stuff with like the idea that everything is building off of something that already exists. But the way that The Exorcist used, first of all, effects and makeup, and even just the topics that they were discussing, it almost makes it impossible to build something better. Because a lot of exorcism films now base their whole movie on someone is possessed or claims to be, and it's the whole thing is some people believe them, some people don't, and then in like the last 10 minutes you get, oh, she really was possessed, who knew? And I felt like The Exorcist is one of the only movies about the devil that there's no question, it is an exorcism that's happening, there's someone possessed, so it's so in your face, there's no believing, disbelieving, it's just showing you what's happening.
And just watching her throughout the film deteriorate almost.
Yeah.
You know, like I adore that. I love that movie so much. We'll come back to The Exorcist. I want to go back to the TV miniseries of It. Now, one question I always ask everybody, and Monica, this may be a tricky one for you because I don't think you knew this one was coming. For those of you that don't know, I usually don't let people know the questions I ask them. So this one's going to be tricky, though.
Okay.
It, the TV miniseries, was broken down into 2 parts. The first part with the kids and the second part with the adults, much like It Chapter 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
So in the TV miniseries, which do you prefer? The first part with the kids or the second part with the adults?
So if you were asking me back when I first saw it, I definitely would say part 1, but now as an adult, I have to say part 2. And I think it mostly has to do with the relatability aspect,
Sure.
like being able to relate to what they're going through, because especially with a film like that, that's not necessarily intended for children to watch. There's a lot of like stereotypes and kind of predictable arcs used in regards to children when you're watching something that's not necessarily intended for them. So I think that, yeah, when I was younger, part 1, and now I would say part 2. So I'm sorry if that answer cheats, but
No, it's funny because a lot of people say that, but I'm just looking for what I want here is complete honesty. That's why I don't like to tell people the questions I ask. I don't want you to prepare. I want to go I want your legit gut reaction answers. And that's perfect because I feel the same way. As a kid, I wanted to be Jonathan Brandis without a stutter. Like that was me. I was Bill, you know, and now as an adult, I watch these movies and I'm just like, man, I still want to be the adult version of Bill, the guy, you know, like that's minus the ponytail, but that guy was awesome.
mm-hmm.
Like I love the It miniseries. I still have the VHS of it. Like just to show, like I feel like there's some movies that you don't have to upgrade to Blu-ray DVD. And that's one of them for me. I love the graininess of that. Alien is another one. Sleepaway Camp is a third. I love the graininess of those movies. I absolutely love them. And I will never, ever. I updated the Blu-ray of Sleepaway Camp just because of a funny scene. I'll tell you guys when we're done filming. But I love the graininess of the VHSs. That's something to me that I've always been a fan of.
I love my VHS player, and sometimes people think I'm crazy. Even I'm currently at my parents' house in New Hampshire, and we still use a VHS player up here and have like a huge VHS collection because even though it's not made anymore, I just love the nostalgia of watching VHS tapes to begin with. Like we have a VHS of the Blair Witch Project here.
Yeah.
We have a VHS of The Shining that's in 2 different tapes. Same with Titanic, which is in 2 different tapes. Like those, and it's always at a pivotal moment too, like where tape 1 stops and then you're like reaching for the other one and trying to put it in super quickly. But yeah, I love VHS, and it's sad that they don't make it anymore. I'm also very old-fashioned in general, so I don't even have a Blu-ray player. I think there's one here, but I am a very bare bones like VHS DVD kind of gal.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's funny you talk about the Titanic. I remember the Titanic. My grandpa has told me this story. Like he was there and he was telling people, he was yelling, "Don't get on the boat. The boat's going to sink. Why are these people getting on the boat?" And then they came and kicked him out of the movie theater. It was crazy.
Oh my God. Don't get me started on Titanic because Chessie knows.
Yeah. We love the Titanic. Like we will talk about the Titanic, conspiracies with the Titanic all night. Like this will be an all night discussion.
Are you talking about the explosions in the bottom of the Titanic?
Yes, I mean that. And did you know that there was a boat that was close to the Titanic that literally just refused to help them?
See, okay. Email me when we're done with this because I would be happy to do a whole episode based on Titanic conspiracy theories because that's the only conspiracy. I don't believe 9/11 was a conspiracy. I don't believe the moon landing was a conspiracy. But the Titanic, that shit was rigged up. They blew that shit up. I will fight that until the day I die. So we need to get together, whether it's an episode of mine or an episode of yours. Yeah. We need to get together and have a whole episode about the Titanic.
We love
promise me we'll do that.
Oh, 100%. There'll be arguments about it. It'll be a heated discussion.
We love the Titanic.
We love the Titanic.
Yeah.
I don't have a pen. I'm gonna email you right when we're done with this because we're gonna talk about this.
Yeah.
We will get back to this.
Yeah.
So now let me go back. I gotta go back to the Exorcist thinking now. Okay, with the Exorcist, we talked about which scene affected you the most. Now I want to know, is this a movie that you think you watched repeatedly growing up, or is this one that was kind of just like a one and done for you?
Oh, repeatedly. I am a masochist. Like it was it's, I shouldn't say, oh, it like scarred me, because in a way it did, but it also made me so open to, like, I didn't even know that genre film like that existed.
Right.
Yeah, well, obviously at that point, I think I was in 7th grade maybe when I watched it, especially because I went to a really strict Catholic school.
Oh,
Things,
God.
I mean, things were blasphemous. Like, you don't watch movies to do with the devil. You don't even speak of it. So for me, I think it was more like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch it multiple times, and I'm going to talk about it, in church or in chapel, just to shake things up. But
Rebellion.
yeah, but I could watch it, even like to this day, I could watch it twice in a row if I have to. I love that movie.
So you're like Beetlejuice. It gets funnier every time I see it.
We love Beetlejuice. We also love
her to see Beetlejuice, a musical, for her birthday last year.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're huge Beetlejuice fans too. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I got 2 more questions for you guys. Monica, I'm gonna start with you on this one. We talked about your first horror movie and how it affected you. Now I'm gonna go scream on you. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie?
So this is a very loaded question for me, because I feel like there are so many subgenres within like horror films.
Sure.
My favorite genre of film in general is psychological thrillers, which aren't horror movies, but someone who doesn't know much about movies might think that they are. But my favorite like horror film has to be a toss-up between The Shining and The Blair Witch Project. I love both of those movies so much for such different reasons, but at the end of the day, I think The Shining probably takes a cake. And I know that's also a very basic answer, but I saw that movie for the first time probably when I was 12 or 13 with my mom, because I knew from a very young age I wanted to go into film. And so my mom and I kind of just started watching movies all the time. And I remember the first time I watched The Shining, I had kind of like a visceral reaction to like how well made it was. And the funny thing is, when it came out, it was such a flop. Like,
yeah, everybody hated it.
Yeah.
My mom said that she and my dad's first date, or one of their first dates, was to go see The Exorcist, and my dad left. Like, but she said that when The Shining came out, it was a total flop. Like, everyone thought it was really bad. Like, no one really talked about it. It was not critically acclaimed. And then over time, it became more and more famous. And then it's kind of like Stanley Kubrick died, and then everyone started to look at his films more after that and finally start respecting them. But yeah, I love The Shining. I am also a huge Jack Nicholson fan. Like,
yeah.
I love that man so much. Very happy he has not gotten canceled like the majority of other white men in Hollywood.
Well, I have some bad news for you, Monica. He does have multiple children that he refuses to like acknowledge. I know. I didn't want to say it.
Oh God.
But you could choose to ignore and just.
I could feel the earth shaking right now with anger.
No, I never knew this. Oh God.
Well, while you're soaking that up, Monica, Francesca, what is your favorite horror movie?
I hate to be the person who chooses like something newer, because I know people in the horror community love to bring it to classics. But if I'm gonna be really honest, I have to say Hereditary. I love that movie so much. I think it's perfect.
See, I can't bash you for choosing a newer movie, because I'll be honest with you, I have 2 that are completely tied. One is House from 1986, and the other is The Cabin in the Woods. I think The Cabin in the Woods is so amazing. It's so brilliant, and it's the perfect mix of comedy and horror. And I could talk about The Cabin in the Woods all day. That's another one that I completely adore that movie. So,
me too. That's what I based my short film off of, was Cabin in the Woods, like a commentary on horror, because it's the perfect, that whiteboard. I can't tell you how many times I've freeze framed that whiteboard.
And look at all the different possible outcomes.
Yes,
me too.
I love that. It's hilarious.
Mhm.
And what you're talking about, like even with the guy, he's like, those two guys, the guy, I can't remember their real names, but the bad guy from Billy Madison and the
Yes.
other dude, those guys are so funny. Even if you just watch them in the background when they're doing stuff, they are so funny. They make that movie so much better. Like, I'm so glad that their roles are so big in that movie.
Yeah.
But Monica, I have one more question for you before I get to the last question for everybody. It. We're talking about It, the remake, the feature film, or the made-for-TV one or the remake. Which one are you choosing as your favorite?
I know this is probably not an answer people want to hear because people, since the remake have come out, have talked so much crap about the original. But I don't know. I have to say the original. And I think it's because I'm also like, I think Tim Curry is just
Chef's kiss.
like.
See, and I get what you're saying. People bash the old one once they see the remake, but a lot of people don't even realize is that original TV miniseries, that was not a Hollywood film. It was a made-for-TV miniseries. That's why you couldn't have a bunch of swearing, a bunch of blood, a bunch of, they didn't have a budget for that. It was a TV miniseries. It played every Thursday at 8 o'clock. I remember this. Like, I remember this happening. And I love the original one because of Tim Curry, because Tim Curry didn't look scary. He looked like a approachable clown. Bill Skarsgård, again, nothing but love and respect for him, but his version of Pennywise is terrifying. I wouldn't approach him. If I seen that clown, I'm out. See ya. But Tim Curry's, that is one that when I think of Pennywise, I think of a lovely looking, happy clown that you would want to approach. So he lures you into that false sense of security. And with him being based around John Wayne Gacy, John Wayne Gacy was a community guy. I mean, he was loved by so many people, and yet he was this terrible monster. So that's how I think of Pennywise. So I agree with you. In my heart, I love the new one. Born and raised in Michigan, up in Mackinac, we have a Paul Bunyan statue. And so that scene in the book and in the It Chapter 2 remake seriously affects me because I used to go hang out at that Paul Bunyan statue. This summer, last year, my mom passed away. This summer, we went up north and we dumped her ashes there because that was a spot we always went together. So, I mean, that scene in the book and in the movie, it scared me. Even as a kid reading the book, the Paul Bunyan statue coming to life because life imitates art type thing. Yeah. That hit me in my chest. So I like the TV version better, but I'm not going to knock the remake because I love the It remake as well.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think going back to the psychological thriller aspect, I think since there's not as much blood or swearing in the original miniseries, I think that's another thing that just spooks me even more because it is more psychological and Pennywise is more approachable. That it's easier to be like, oh no, I would fall for that, as opposed to looking at Bill Skarsgård and being like, I wouldn't go near him with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
So
that's exactly it. Well, I always end these with the same question. Monica, let's start with you. We're talking about It the miniseries. We're ranking it on a scale of 0 to 5 skulls, 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. What do we give the It miniseries?
Ooh. Are we allowed to do half skulls?
Absolutely. Half and quarter. You can go 3/8 for all I care.
Okay, I'm gonna give it 3 1/4 skulls. Is that fair?
Fair answer. Absolutely fair answer. That's the thing. I believe there's no perfect movie except House, but there's no perfect movie. Every movie could be improved in some way, and that's why I'm not a person that bashes remakes. I think there are good remakes. I think there's bad remakes. But I think that you could always build on something. To me, probably the best horror film of all time, in just my opinion, is the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And yet that movie still has the worst ending of all time. I hate the blow up doll through the house, but I think that that's as close to a perfect horror movie as you can get, and you can still find a flaw with it. So 3 1/4 is absolutely fair. How about you, Francesca? We're talking about The Exorcist remake coming soon, so we'll be able to talk about that. But the original, what are you giving that on your 0 to 5 skulls ranking?
I think I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. I love it. But I I think there's a mystique that follows it that maybe adds something to it that elevates it to a level that I don't quite think it's on. I think that just sort of mystifies it to people, which I get, and it's great. But if we're just going straight movie watching with none of the this happened behind the scenes and this happened on set, this person died, like, because that adds a lot of spook, I'm going 4 out of 5.
Perfect answer. And you're right, because it's somebody that, you know, today watches that movie, that doesn't know the mystique and stuff behind it. That's probably, you know, that's a good movie, but I don't see what the big buildup is about it.
Right.
You know, and you're right. You know, you watch these cursed films about like that and Poltergeist and the Twilight Zone, and it gives you a whole new holy fuck about the movies. Yeah. So don't go anywhere, ladies. I have a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. Remember to go down here in the description and check out all the hard work these ladies are doing. Until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll talk to you guys soon.